Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Louise from Harry, the people technology platform for the hospitality industry. Today, we have an event called Redefining Retention in Hotels. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have an absolutely fantastic panel from a really diverse range of hotels and resort businesses. So I think there's going to be some really, really good discussion today. A few weeks ago, we ran a recruitment summit and the very well publicised staffing crisis. Kate Nichols talked about, 50% of operators in hospitality are experiencing a labour shortage. And hospitality in general currently is a third of the size that it was pre-pandemic, with a 28% drop in headcount. However, with Brexit and people not necessarily returning to the industry, it's been a real challenge to recruit people. So we're going to be talking today about those challenges and about what our different operators are doing to really kind of retain their staff currently. 500,000 people in the last week, including myself, were pinged. So that's causing issues as well. And some people, end up not being able to work for 10 days. So that layered onto the staffing crisis is creating a real challenge. And with staycations on the rise, I think hotel operators are really being impacted. So a few housekeeping tips. Please do ask questions. We will answer as many questions as we can if we have the time. Today's session goes on for about an hour. You'll see in the right-hand side, you can ask your questions either in the chat or the Q&A. So please do ask questions. And I think we're going to run a little poll as well, which you'll see in the poll section. And we've also got some expo rooms, some sponsor rooms. So at the end of the session, if you have a few minutes, do have a little browse around. We've got a room for HOSPA and their event that they're running later in the year, which is Hospice. We've got a little room for the Institute of Hospitality and obviously Harry as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our host and facilitator for the day, Jane Pendlebury. Hello, Jane.
Morning, Louise. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So Jane has had many years in the hotel industry and is a real expert when it comes to hotels and leisure. She is now the CEO of HOSPA, which is the Association for Hotels in the UK. And Jane, I'm going to pass over to you now to introduce the rest of the panel. And I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. I'm delighted to be here today to host this redefining staff retention, which is definitely the hottest topic in our industry at the moment. So I'd like to invite Robert Richardson to join me and tell us a little bit about himself. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Good.
Good. Right. I'm Robert Richardson. I'm the new Chief Executive of the Institute of Hospitality, which is the global industry body for hospitality professionals. And pre that, I was a hotel general manager for 12 years at various properties.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robert. And Craig Cunningham.
Hi, Jane. Hi, everyone. My name's Craig. I'm the Group Food and Drink Director for the Student Hotel. We're a European-based hotel group, which looks after students. We have co-working as well as restaurants, bars, meeting and events right across Europe. Prior to that, I worked for the Principal brand in the UK, and prior to that, I was the International Operations Director for Jamie Oliver Restaurants, everything outside of the UK.
Brilliant. Thank you, Craig. And we also have Andrew Coney with us today.
Good morning. Andrew Coney at the Harry Hotel. Different Harry, only one R. We're an 85-bedroom hotel here in Belgravia in London. A year ago, we employed 110 people. and right now we're employing 75. So it starts to signify some of what we're going to talk about today. We've just opened a hotel in Hong Kong, so we have a sister property, which is a 210-bedroom hotel. Not the easiest of times to open a hotel, but we've done it.
Brilliant, congratulations. And Paul Spencer.
I don't know how I follow that, but hi, I'm Paul Spencer. I am the ops director for Eden Group, looking after the Lock brand. I found out, reminding myself actually today, that I've been in the industry for 30 years this year. So that was quite a revelation when I looked in the mirror this morning. The brand that I work for at the moment is going through hyper growth. We've opened 7 hotels during lockdown. So as you can imagine, some of the progressive challenges that we're facing at the moment around staffing. So yeah, good to have that conversation today.
Thank you, Paul. And last but not least, Dave Daniels Eckhart, if you'd like to join us.
Good morning, my name's Dave. I'm from the Club Company, which is a group of hotels, golf clubs and leisure clubs and spas. We've got 15 golf clubs around the UK. I'm group head of F&B and been enrolled for about 3 months. Prior to that, I was with Marco Pierre White Restaurants, and I worked for Coat and Wagamama in various roles as well.
Brilliant. Thank you and welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us here today. So we're going to talk about retaining staff from all sorts of perspectives, from well-being, operational, financial. And we are going to touch on the fact that we're almost in the perfect storm with the pandemic and also with the effects of Brexit and the lack of free movement around the UK. But if we start from a people perspective, because obviously that's the key bit, and I'd like to just explore a little bit what hotels and leisure businesses are specifically doing now to engage their teams. Dave, do you want to kick off on that one?
Yeah, that's fine. So I suppose being quite new in the role, it's quite an interesting position to come into. So during the first lockdown, the business, this is prior to me joining, the business held quite a big staff survey to look at how they were feeling prior to lockdown and coming out of lockdown. And obviously that survey's changed over the period of time. But there's some real key things that came out of that. The usual ones of pay and working conditions were kind of one of the ones. But there's some other ones in there about development and future growth and the training and what they were getting. And there was a nervousness about being thrown back into a role that they maybe weren't prepared for because maybe their managers had been taken out. And then there was this feeling of they're going to be needed to upskill, but without the skill there. So we've focused quite heavily on that training development piece. We've deployed a few more trainers into the business. We've just created a future learning academy. So to look at those, I suppose, junior managers and upskill them for the future. And the first session of that was yesterday, actually, where we had 15 of those junior managers starting that journey. With that survey as well, we've really focused on some of the key bits. So one of the bits that came up was the food and beverage offering that the staff were getting, and also the staff facilities around that. So things like the staff rooms where they were eating, the equipment that was in the staff rooms. So we've spent quite a lot of money just making those areas better for the people when they're in those spaces as well. So just having that basic level of care for those people, that's come from the surveys, but we're following that up with huge amounts of conversations. And that's the bit that's key for us. I think the surveys are good. The actual talking to the people and understanding how they're feeling is key. Great, thank you. And Andrew, presumably you closed the hotel during lockdown. You didn't have any choice, I'm assuming. Did you do anything to keep your staff engaged? And is there anything specifically that you did or you heard any other hoteliers do that was particularly good at keeping your staff loyal and engaged and happier to come back to work?
Yes, I think the critical thing was to communicate and keep in touch. And I think we're lucky in a small business like this, we could make very rapid decisions. So when government announced that lockdown was happening and whenever they made any of their announcements, we could pretty instantaneously go back to the team and say, this is what we're going to do in response. So they weren't left hanging. They weren't feeling insecure. They always knew where we stood. And I think that's really key. And I think some of the bigger organizations should have picked up on that because I think a lot of people were left hanging for weeks at times. So I think it was all about security. And I then think we did some fun things, whether it was online cocktail tasting, wine appreciation. We did all sorts of things just to sort of not only keep the learning going, but just keep people amused and engaged. And there was a social element to it. We did online escape rooms, all sorts of things I've never thought I would ever do. But they kept the team going.
I think we've all done things we thought we would never do before. Paul, presumably a lot of your establishments remained open, did they, during the lockdown?
Yeah, so we didn't close any of our businesses. The apart hotel concept lends itself to that. We looked after a lot of key workers, and we did a lot of work with the NHS actually in our Edinburgh property, giving care to cancer patients that couldn't be in hospital. So actually we found other ways of looking out for the community more than anything else. That has allowed us to keep our team pretty engaged. But I think what we are seeing more than anything else is that crave for culture, crave for being around people again, the sort of craving to be in an environment where you can, get together, talk and celebrate some things. I think we've all got a bit of Teams fatigue and online fatigue. I don't know how many gin tastings I did over lockdown. I think it was mostly, maybe one less than Andrew, but I think, I certainly found drinking in the kitchen on my own quite tiring. So what we're looking to do, maybe not, what we're all looking to do at the moment is really re-engage with our culture. Eden and Locke certainly put culture and culture fit as #1 priority for us. So making sure that we really re-establish our well-being, making sure we really re-establish that community that we've built within the business, and making sure that, we allow our team that time to bring themselves back out of lockdown one way or another.
And Craig, at the student hotel, did you remain open in Amsterdam?
We remained open in all our locations across Europe due to the fact we have students staying with us at 50, 60, in some properties, 70%. So it was, we were managed to maintain a really good operation that allowed us to obviously still continue to trade today. But the biggest thing we did is, because we have our student community and our work communities, we combined them together. There was no difference. So the same facilities and offerings that were there for our students were also there for our staff, whether that be online or as near to physical as you were allowed or could be. So again, we never distanced from that, and that's allowed us to build an even stronger culture and base than where we were before, and that was pretty strong. And I see that continuing as we continue to move on.
Brilliant, thank you. And of course, Robert, you went through a transition yourself, didn't you, during lockdown, from hotels into your lovely role now at the Institute. Were a lot of your staff, how did you feel when you left the hotels? Were they happy? Were they engaged?
They were thrilled.
Thanks, Andrew. I started the whole pandemic. I started as GM of one hotel. Exited partway through to join another hotel, and then exited again to join the Institute. So every time we emerged from lockdown, I ended up leaving the hotel for a different job, and it was a very odd experience. And certainly changing roles during quite a unique circumstance is unusual, but something that Paul and Craig have said and really resonates is that we are a community. So there was always this thought line going through from business to business to business about how you come in, involve yourself with that community. And the Grand, my first hotel, the Cave, and then the Institute of Hospitality all have had that community feel. And it really kept me buoyant, and it made the situation a lot more, not palatable, but a lot more effective, I think, than it could have been, especially given the pressure of the circumstances.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the results of the poll. There's a poll going on for our viewing delegates here, asking what employees value most in remaining loyal to a brand. And the votes do keep changing. Pay was right up there at the beginning, with the first few people thinking that pay was 50% of the most important thing, but that has actually dwindled over the last few minutes. But that does take us on quite nicely to the financial aspect. But it seems at the moment, from the audience's perspective, mental health is featuring quite high, benefits, leadership, obviously always important, especially at the moment, I think probably more, and pay. But from a financial perspective, I think, Andrew, you said you had significantly less staff at the moment than you'd had before the pandemic, prior to the pandemic. Is that through choice, or is that because you have got roles that you're looking to fill at the moment?
we still have vacancies. We did unfortunately have to let some people go last year because our long-term forecast just didn't sustain the headcount that we originally had. So we've gone through a pretty tough time. We were all screaming to open and making a lot of noise about, how unfair we thought it was the way we were being treated. And then the day came when we could open, and we were really bereft of a number of people, which made it very tough to open. And to this day, I can't open my restaurant every single day of the week. So I'm only open at weekends in our main restaurant. So it's proved particularly challenging. And the vast majority of people that we did retain came back. We had very little of this scenario where people just suddenly decided they're not returning to hospitality. But I have heard a lot of that, and I think that's one of the key parts of this conversation is why are people leaving hospitality?
That is a key question. Dave, what's your perception on people leaving and retaining staff within your businesses?
Yeah, well, I think during the first lockdown, the bit that I saw was a lot of, I think, chefs in the majority, that kind of sous chef role that unfortunately were made redundant from quite a lot of the properties I was involved with, went on to work for, anecdotally, places like the Amazon or the Sainsbury's and that delivery one, and have stayed there. That they unfortunately found a better work-life balance in there. And this is one of the things we're having to look at within our business now, is what is that work-life balance? What is the sweet spot of that? And the days of doing the 12, 14, 16-hour shifts that I grew up doing are absolutely no longer acceptable in any way, and should never have been acceptable all those years ago. But that mentality of that's just what you do in hospitality has got to stop. It's got to stop. And like Andrew just said, we are looking at whether our restaurants are able to open 7 days a week, all times, putting in breaks or stopping service during the day to make sure the staff are just stopping to eat. There was a period a little while ago where there's a pride around chefs as well, isn't there? That they just want to push on and get it done. But at some point, as a leader, you've got to step in and say, we're stopping service from this point to this point because you need some food. If you're going to do a longer shift than we can, we want you to, and you're doing that, we need to feed you. We need to get you a break. You need to stop this. And then it's got to the point where we've looked at a couple of the sites and just stopped service completely, where it's not right to do that. There's no, I'm trying to think of a better way of phrasing that, but it's just not right. It's not acceptable to have chefs or people working that amount of time. Yeah. And I think when you're putting that into your teams and giving that message that we're happy to stop service or we're happy to stop service, that gives a great sense of relief, I suppose, and it empowers them to make the right choices around that as well. But it's difficult decisions to make when you're running hotels and you're saying we can't serve food on this day or for this period of time.
Yeah, I think weighing up the value of the money coming in from our guests against the health of our employees, because they're a big cost to us as well, and retaining them is a lot more cost effective than recruiting new people. Craig, did you get support for your staff from governments across Europe in the same way that we benefited from the furlough here?
Yes, we did. It very differently from country to country. The Netherlands, we were very well supported. Germany, slightly different. And it was based on whether they were full-time or part-time hours, so that did vary. We also were given support on our fixed costs as well, which then alleviates a lot of the pressure on the labour. So the labour became less, I don't say too less of an issue, but it was less of a focus on that. And it was really about retention and keeping these people with us throughout this journey. And where the government didn't fulfil the gap, we plugged the gap ourselves during the first two lockdowns across the entire group, irrespective. So everyone was treated fairly and the same across the entire group, which, hats off to the board and the investors for making sure that happened. And that's really helped us continue as we've come out of that. People haven't forgotten things like that. And that's really important.
Thank you. We've got one of our delegates watching us today come up with a question actually back to Dave. And I want to make sure we stay on the people thoughts here rather than so much more on the commercial. But the question is, love that you are trying to accommodate your team by closing for some hours. Obviously, that has a commercial impact. Is that a tough decision?
I think yes and no. I mean, if I don't close my kitchen for a day and that chef, or a day or two, and that chef doesn't get the time off, at some point quite soon down the line, he's going to burn out and I'm going to have to close that kitchen for probably 2 or 3 weeks and then possibly go through a whole recruitment process. So it's a short-term pain, but it's the right thing to do. So it is a tough decision, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. And it's the only way at the moment that we're going to be able to retain staff. You know, ideally we'd support that chef with agency chefs. They're a struggle. If we can do that, that's great. And we're going down that route. We've got a lot of agency chefs in the business at the moment. But for smaller sites where we can't get that support, the right thing to do is to close that kitchen for a day or 2.
Right, brilliant. And Robert, when you were your 2 hotels experience during lockdown, what was your view on retaining staff? Because I guess you were going in with fresh eyes in a way, and not necessarily knowing the history of all the different people. Was that a benefit for you, that you could go in and just see it for what it was as you arrived? Maybe the second hotel. It
was my first hotel. I built the team, and I'd been with them a number of years, and they became like family. And turning Andrew's point around earlier, on my last day there, it was a very unhappy day for me. I was leaving some great people, and I'm really pleased, very selfishly, I never had to make the tough decisions with that group of people, because that would have been almost like picking which family member to ostracize. Coming into my next hotel, I had experience of one of the team previously at another role, and everyone else was new. So I had the ability to be a bit more analytical. Now, unfortunately, during the lockdown, we, much like Andrew, had to take some decisions and move some people outside of the business. And I think being able to do that without any emotional connection was quite useful. And as hard as that sounds, it's the honest truth. And we've all had to make some tough decisions through this. And I think being able to be just a little bit more analytical about it was useful in protecting the whole. Happily, as we look to come out of lockdown, we were able to contact people that had moved on and look at bringing them back into the business. So they were never far from our thoughts.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's always tough, those sorts of things. So Paul, on technology, do you make use of technology to help retain and keep your staff engaged?
Yeah, we do. We use our Workplace is most probably our go-to, and we recently created a new chatbot called Buddy, who happens to be a dog, just in case you wondered, where team members can ask questions which we can answer. So we're trying to look at technology to give 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access to our team should they feel worried or concerned or need to have a question that is maybe keeping them up at night. But a majority of our investment is in people. Our brand is about being human and celebrating that culture of that. So while technology is good, we absolutely double down on the in-person interactions. You know, from our point of view, you know, it's interesting to hear people's view on Brexit and where we think we've got it right, got it wrong. You know, some of our businesses run on 11 team members. So for us, they're very lean teams operating very big hotels. So it's important to keep them as engaged and retained as we can. And I think the big part of that has been the human element of our culture. You know, we encourage our team to question, we encourage our team to evolve with us, and we invest in them massively, in something that as an industry we should have been doing 20 years ago.
We definitely should. And you mentioned Brexit there. Have you lost within your business any staff to have gone back to?
I think this is a bit of a Trojan horse, without wanting to be too controversial, which is that, you know, obviously I run a European business, so I've got hotels everywhere. Before this role, I was with IHG looking after Europe, Russia, and Israel. So I phoned around some of my friends and I was like, you know, is there 500 waiters in Paris just waiting to start work somewhere? Have they all gone and hidden somewhere? And the reality is every country in Europe is suffering from exactly the same thing that we're suffering from. I had a call with Zurich this morning. We're looking at a hotel over there. Staff shortage is still part of the problem they've got there as well. So this isn't the Brexit issue. That is transitioning movement of staff. But actually at the core of this problem, the real root of this is, as an industry, we are flagged behind what we should have been doing as a business. You know, we still list free meals and uniforms as a benefit. I mean, we need to have a word with ourselves, actually.
Yeah, that's right. Robert, you were in Kent, weren't you? Which yeah. I remember we did an article with the press about Kent suffering or most with the people going home and whatever. Did you have a big problem with Brexit and stuffing?
I think the two challenges we had. Now, if we look over the pandemic, the last figures I saw said 1.3 million non-UK nationals left the UK. That was a factor, but I do agree with Paul. It's not the be all and end all. Something I get challenged with in my new role is, do we continue to blame Brexit in the totality of the situation? No, we don't. I think faith in the sector has been diminished. We've had repeated shutdowns, we've had redundancies, and people just aren't sure if the job security is there. Could you say, with your hand on your heart, we would be in some sort of restriction in 3 months' time and we'd have to close again? So that is a question. Where I was situated in Kent in my second hotel is Canterbury, and that's a huge university town. And a lot of our entry-level roles were university students, and unfortunately, there was no university students. So that impacted us to a greater degree than Brexit. Another situation we've had recently, and it's something I'm hearing about an awful lot, is several high-profile employers have been called out for their behaviour in managing their teams. And again, that's impacted faith in the sector. And I think, as Paul was saying, free uniforms and free meals, then that's not a benefit. That's just a basic right. Do we expect our staff to pay for their own work clothes? No, of course we don't. Why are we saying that's a benefit? And I think the picture that's being painted of us in some quarters at the moment is that we're almost a draconian employer, and that's something that we were feeling, certainly in Kent, the impacts of at the end of last year. So I certainly think we need to start looking at the PR of the industry, because actually it's a fantastic industry.
That's so valid. It's such a valid point. I think, just sorry to build off the back of that, you know, I looked at, I think I was saying to Andrew yesterday, my mother's a hoarder, not that that's relevant to today's conversation, but she kept all my old contracts from when I first came into the industry. And actually, when you read my first contract actually as a commie chef, and you read some of the benefits that some of our businesses are positioning now, the shift hasn't been as big. People have reskilled out of our industry because of insecurity about the stability of our business at the moment. And we're doing zero to bring them back. And I think that's the big challenge that we need to face into. You know, we're all, as an industry, we're sat around scratching our heads, but the reality is we're 15 years late to the table. We've had this crisis, we're out the other side of it, touch wood, to some level or degree. And now we need to take responsibility for what maybe we haven't created, but certainly our history has created. And we've got this opportunity to start paying living wage, to start making sure that we are looking after and caring for people. Because until we do that, this is a futile exercise. You could throw anything you want at it, but until people feel valued in an industry that they love, being paid well, being looked after well, do you know what? It's just pointless. It's a circular conversation. We need to draw a line in the sand and say, this, we take it seriously, we pay you seriously, we care about you, we look after you, and we'll do things. And you're part of the thing that Eden is doing is that be human culture. It's putting people dead slap bang at the forefront of everything. And, you know, it has a seismic shift in people's mentalities. And I think for all of us, we need to sit down and actually have a real honest conversation about the shape of our industry and how important EBITDA is over actually paying people a little bit extra.
If I may, Paul, a colleague sent me a contract for a job they were about to start recently, and it actually had a line in there about paying a contribution to your knives. So
lovely, right?
Able to cook for us, but we're expecting them to pay for the equipment to do their job. It's absolutely absurd in 2021.
It just it breaks your heart, right? It does genuine. That's like, you know, starting. I was going to use the analogy of starting as an accountant having to buy a calculator, but you mostly would have to. So, you know, I suppose that there's so many things that we try and skimp on to drive that bottom line, when actually let's drive revenue, let it flow through the account, get our team to actually look after people and care for people. And you'll pay back, because as all of us on this call know, the consistency of your workforce drives experience, drives retention, and drives profitability of your business. Not reskilling people all the time, not constantly recruiting. Hang on to the good ones that you've got, look after them and love them, and your business will thrive. But if you pay people badly, they're not going to hang around, are they? Hey, I feel like I'm on a bit of a soapbox here. Hey, I might sort of step off and sit down. But you know, it's just important.
I'm going to be quiet because I could rant about this for the rest of the hour now. So,
hey, let's go. Jane will freak out if we do that.
We've got one very specific question on employee benefits actually coming from Nick Boswell, who's listening to us today. And he has asked, how important has staff housing been in attracting and maintaining a quality workforce? With increased competition amongst hotels to attract staff, how much has housing influenced staff retention? Now, are any of you in the lucky position of being able to have any staff accommodation?
No.
Dave.
So we have limited in a few of our sites, but those sites, interestingly, be the ones that have struggled least with recruitment. You know, it kind of definitely goes hand in hand. We've advertised for a couple of roles as almost search or I suppose testing the waters for a couple of roles with accommodation and without accommodation to look at whether it's worth us renting local houses and stuff like that. And the amount of applications for the same role just with living accommodation has, you know, just way and above. I think if we look at it in numbers, for a commis chef position, we had 2 applications for without accommodation and 39 for with accommodation for exactly the same site. Everything else was worded the same. It was just literally living accommodation available. And that's been for different roles. We've kind of A/B tested that. So yeah, and like I say, in the sites that have accommodation, very, very little issues with recruitment.
Well, I think that's
an absolute key factor. But then looking at what the quality of that accommodation is, again, you know, I lived in and seen some horrific staff accommodation over the years. Yeah, again, not acceptable.
Yeah, no, but that does answer the question nicely. And yes, I think probably a lot of us have experienced staff accommodation in our time and maybe wouldn't want to see our own children in it. I guess the root of the problem, though, is education and perception of entering the industry. There's a lot less courses now, further education courses. A lot of the university and colleges that were doing hospitality courses have merged those into the business and business studies. So there's a perception. I keep using perception, so I'm not going to use that word again. There's no barriers to entry to hospitality. Fantastic. Anybody can join the industry, and that works for us in so many ways. But it also really works against us in that the thought is that it's not a skilled industry, and yet it so is a skilled industry. And yes, you can get there through hard work, but if you come in with some training beforehand, then that just should springboard you into that. I don't know if anyone's got anything to add on that. Andrew, you haven't said much for a while. Do you want to throw something in there?
Nice to get a word in between Paul and Robert. But...
Oh, come off it! You're the worst.
I was invited back to my school a few years ago, which was a grammar school, and I was invited to present prizes. And I stood up in front of all these students whose parents were there too, and I talked about hospitality, and you could just see the sort of eyes rolling as if to say, what on earth is he talking to us about? My son is not going to go into hospitality. It's going to be, you know, an accountant, a surgeon, a barrister. You know, that was the very, very clear impression I got. And through the course of what I then said, I hope there was a degree of conversion, that people actually started to think, oh, this sounds quite exciting. You know, and he's had an interesting career and he's done some really amazing things. And he's traveled a lot. So we just have a perception problem. And it's been going on for years and years and years. And back to what Paul was saying, unless we start to do things a lot better. And I think it's really sad we're having this conversation. You know, why haven't we woken up a long time ago? This pandemic has done one big favor to us all. I think that it's opened our eyes to the fact that we have to change perceptions of the industry, and that'll only happen by our behavior changing. Many of us on this call have talked about family and community, and I think that's how we do operate our businesses. But how many people on their website say the people are at the core of our business? And they absolutely don't mean a word of it. It's such shallow talk. And through to these sort of incentives and benefits that we offer people. I think the difference with the pandemic is that people have come back with a huge feeling of insecurity about this industry. We've been flicking people on and off like light switches through the last 15, 16 months. And yeah, they've started to set their sights beyond. And, you know, the security's still not there. And I think we've done a big piece of work here to embrace everybody. I sat down with every individual when they came back from lockdown and just talked. How do you feel? Are you comfortable about being back at work? Are you comfortable being amongst people again? Are you comfortable traveling on public transport? And it was extraordinary what came out from some people. So, you know, when we go back to that poll and the number of people talking about mental well-being, if you'd asked me about mental well-being a year ago, I wouldn't even have had the first jot about what I was going to talk about. And yet, in the course of this year, I have a relative who was on the brink of nervous breakdown. And it really woke me up to the subject. And I think that's really what's come out of this pandemic for me is, get into the heads of everybody that's working for you and understand how do they actually feel, and do they feel secure, and do they feel loved?
I think a lot of people have spoken to people within the industry who have struggled a lot. And from my point of view, I think the people that are struggling the most are the people I probably least expected to. Yeah. It's the stronger people who look stronger, who behave in a leadership fashion. They are the ones that have probably struggled the most. So I think that's a really valid point. We need to make sure that we are talking to each and every one of our team members and just make sure they are all okay. And whilst that takes quite a long time to go through the process, it's got to be worth it. Which actually balancing the benefits and image of our industry with shareholders' expectation is a question that we've got here from Declan Gallagher, who's listening to us today, and he's asking exactly that. How do you balance updating the benefits and image of our industry with shareholders' expectations? Now that's not a one-word answer, but if anybody wants to grab that one.
I'll jump.
Go on,
no, that wasn't the answer. Sorry. So I think for us, it's about dialogue, right? Surely all of this is about conversations. We have to have. We're lucky. We're backed by a really good backer who is enabling us to invest the right amount of cash where we need to invest, because they see the bigger picture that if we retain our team, the consistency of our proposition grows. Our growth, our property growth, our asset value growth all grows off the back of that. It's about short-termism. Do you want EBITDA today? Do you want profitability flowing through to the bottom line today, or are you in this for the long haul? And if you're in it for the long haul, then that conversation with shareholders is all about the vision that comes, the 2027 vision, 2028 vision, and building to get there. Because we will get to a stage where we've burnt through everyone that's going to work in the industry, and then they haven't got any profit, and they've got no one working there. Then you are compromising the service and offer. And what you end up doing is refunding money, shutting down businesses. We're on a tipping point at the moment. And to give a shareholder 1% less, to give your team 1% more, the value add that will give is huge. So while I recognize that is a very difficult conversation to have, hence the reason I'm not a CEO and have no ambition to be one, they can deal with that. They get paid the bucks to do that, right? So there is the desire to have an open and honest, candid conversation. Now, there will be companies that don't want to do that, and you have to accept those. We have all got hospitality companies that on this call in our industry that we wouldn't work for that exact reason. And I think it's important that actually the cream rises to the top, and those that really care about this industry make a change. Because if we don't, we're done. We are done. We're going to get to the stage where, even Andrew having the conversation at school with the parents, that becomes harder and harder and harder to understand, because we're not paying them enough. We're not looking after them. We're burning through them, back-to-back shifts, 12 hours, The conversation with shareholders, if they're in the industry for the right reason, should be an easy conversation.
Can I jump in there, Jane? Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I've had actual conversations over the last year with shareholders and CEOs of big hospitality businesses, predominantly independents, to be fair. And there's, I would say, probably 80% of them are hugely amenable, aware of the situation. Picking up on Dave's point earlier, you shut your restaurant for 2 days a week to make sure you can open it for the next 2 months, 2 years. There's others out there that, and I quote them, say they don't care about time off, and they don't care about holidays, and they don't care about work-life balance. And you're trying to explain to them that at the moment the talent pool is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And if you continue with that view, you're going to fast go to the back of the queue. And then your debt level is going to increase because you don't own the asset and you only really run the business. But getting it through to them, it's almost like tough love. It's hard to do. So I think for those employers out there, and if there are any on the call, you need to take a minute and actually think about the longevity of your business versus the immediate. You can have cash flow coming in now, but there will be an end date to it. And you really need to protect your people because they're the ones that are actually doing the work and bringing it in for you. So you have to be honest with the CEOs and the shareholders. And sometimes I think on this lofty pedestal where you're just looking at balance sheets and you don't actually know the names of the 500 people you employ, it's very easy to get disconnected, but you really need to just take a minute and look at the operation, look at the people, because you will be the loser in the end.
I think it's quite important there, both Robert and Paul and Andrew will hit on something whilst a lot of these bigger corporate companies were cutting back on investing in people, I know at the Student Hotel we were massively investing. We were increasing our budgets. We launched an online learning platform, which wasn't just what we thought should be on there. The teams were telling us what they wanted to see. There was a human touch too. There was a human face-to-face follow-up wherever it was permitted. And that learning platform has really gone from success to success with us. And this isn't me just saying that because, you know, I'm part of the management team. This is the teams telling us, and we can see this by the way they're actually using it and how often they're using it. You know, whether it's through surveys, whether they can ask any questions, it tells you who's posted. And really, it's a fantastic tool that, you know, hats off to our HR team and the rest of the team for getting it launched so quickly. But it's really, really helped us. But I kind of just want to go back one step. We asked about attracting new people into our business. And, you know, in the Netherlands, is a very strong, we work very closely, a lot of hospitality businesses here do, with the local hotel schools, whether it's university, etc. And hospitality here is slightly different than the UK. It is seen as, it's very much seen as a career. And every year we take a group of interns in, and we've seen some amazing success. I talk of one young lady called Amber who had been with me for literally 3-4 years, started off on a 1-year placement, which she had to, her thesis had to be about her placement. So automatically it was LinkedIn. It was professional. I had to fill in documents on the way. I met with her tutor, and giving that little bit of time gave so much back. Amber ended up, you know, coordinating all our food and drink openings across Europe, even during the pandemic times. And to see somebody so young come on so quickly at 25, I know she's going to go on to be absolutely future leader in this business. And that's what we need to be involved in, more engaging them and getting them before, you know, as part of that whole process, and making sure we're engaging, not waiting till people come to you, but as Andrew said, but going to schools and really trying to grab them in then.
Great. Yeah, and the question actually directed straight to you, Craig, on that is what were teams asking for in terms of training? Was it outside their job role? And the comment is, I think we need to offer outside learning to grow them as individuals, not just employees. So the question part of that is, what were they asking for?
They were asking for, it was kind of threefold. They were asking to increase their knowledge outside of their job, their current job role. And we kind of really want to move away from job descriptions. And part of this project now that we've really been working on, and I've stepped back a little bit from food and drink to work with our experience and people teams, is really around how do we increase their knowledge? How do we keep them? And we're now looking for employees that can do everything. Now it's twofold. It increases their ability and want to stay with us. And potentially somewhere down the line, we know they're going to leave and get a better job. And that's cool. We're really fine with that. But also it helps us if they're multi-skilled throughout our business. So training someone that's, you know, works on the reception in our lobby areas to, you know, to serve coffee, to be an absolute great barista. And we're using internal as well as external people. Our internal resources about 35-40%, and our external resources above that. So we're still investing and we'll continue to invest. But this blended experience for our teams is really going to be at the heart of what we do moving forward. And we're really finding this is helping us retain and start to attract staff as we get the message out there as well.
Yeah, I truly believe that training is a great way forward. So Dave, if we're looking to the future a bit more, how do you think we need to change as a hotel, as a restaurant, as just an business within the hospitality industry?
So I mean, Craig touched on it there. There's almost a few steps back that I think we're looking at anyway, which is almost going back to the old general assistant role, which is, you know, bringing someone in and training them in every single department. And that's how I came up, and it's how lots of other people came up. But it gives you a much more, I suppose, horizontal view of where your future can go, rather than just the very, you know, vertical, I'll become a supervisor, restaurant manager, hotel manager, that way. If you're going that horizontal way, it makes you touch into the accounts department, the marketing department, the reception, and gives you a greater awareness of what you can achieve within that business. And I saw that at restaurant level as well. I had numerous supervisors and assistant managers who, during appraisals or one-to-ones, would talk about training or, you know, HR or accountancy or marketing, and I would then push them towards that way rather than into the obvious step of assistant manager and restaurant manager. and it helps retain them within the industry, but in an area that maybe they haven't thought about before. And I think that's what we need to do when we're talking about going back to schools or highlighting what the industry is. It's not just that kind of service kitchen elements. There's so much more to it, so much, and it's such a broad spectrum of opportunity within the business that I don't think we shout about that enough. And when we are going out to schools and people see me as someone who is a restaurant manager, they think that maybe all there is to it, rather than the marketing element, as I say, the training or the recruitment, the development, the property, the design. There's so much within it that I don't think we shout about, other than just the chef waiter role. So this is what we're doing, is almost backtracking quite a lot and going, general assistant, it won't be that role, but that kind of multi-skilled person to get them ready for the future, because then they can become the general manager of the future or go in another direction, but they have a great understanding of the overall operation, which obviously benefits us, but hopefully benefits them, and we'll want to keep them within the industry. Our greatest failing, I think, is when people leave our jobs and go and work in another industry. I don't care if they go and work in another restaurant group or another hotel group, as long as it's a better job and that's better for them. If somebody leaves me to go and work in Sainsbury's or an office, I feel personally that I failed that person. There's something wrong there. There's no reason why anybody should ever leave our industry. It's an incredible industry.
Yeah, that's certainly how I learned as well with my training with De Vere. I went through the department, so I can quite honestly say I've worked in a hotel kitchen, and I've been a housekeeper and room service, and all the bits that potentially I might not have wanted to try because that wasn't what was driving me at the time. But perhaps, Robert, if I bring you in here, I know the Institute has a great mentoring program. I should think probably while someone is going through that initial training and moving from department to department, if that's the new way forward, probably a mentor then is one of the most important times, because they probably don't get into the camaraderie of the departments if they're there for a shorter period. So the mentor would be really useful there. Do you just want to give a really quick summary of your mentor program?
Sure. So the Institute of Hospitality has a very good program called Mentor Me, which I believe Andrew is actually one of our mentors. And what we do is we take submissions from people like Andrew who want to be a mentor and give up their time and their, I'd suggest, skill. And then mentees that, just like you say, Jane, are hopping between departments in the hotels, not quite forming any bond yet, and want some sort of stable through line. And that's a trend we've seen quite a lot of. I actually took my first mentee on late last year. The Mentor Me scheme is great because it involves people not just in the UK, but internationally. And it just gives you that perspective. So we have one pair, which I'm looking at the moment. The mentee is based in the EU and the mentor is based in England. And there are some differences between how we approach our roles in this country and in France. And there's quite a good dynamic between the pair. And it's good to see. And it's really just having that fresh perspective, not just experience, but also of culture.
Absolutely. And that also just prompted me to remind everyone about the Hoteliers Charter that has been put together as well, which a lot of people here will know Sally Beck from the Royal Lancaster London. And she, when she was Hotelier of the Year, put the Hoteliers Charter together, which I think is a great thing for everybody to involve themselves in, however they do it, even if they just read it, just to remind themselves. But that in turn will have an impact down the line on the parents of people who are encouraging their children to come into the industry, or the opposite, which may be true, and apprentices and those sorts of things. I read an interesting stat about the formal apprentices, the government. There are more apprenticeships in accounting and finance than there are in hospitality. So there's definitely a training gap there. And I think I always think about the adverts, I've said this before, on the television that you see for the military, for the army, be the best you can be anything. It's almost like that in hospitality, isn't it? You can be a lawyer within hospitality if you're with a big chain. You can be anything you want to be within hospitality, and it's a great industry to work in, as we all know. But I guess it would be quite useful, just having a quick check of questions there. I don't think there's, there are some, but what I think I'd quite like to do is ask everybody, just go around the group here and ask them if there's one thing that they would like to give the audience, something to think about to help them retain their staff or think about recruiting new ones. Is there sort of one nugget, or maybe it can be more than one if you want it to be, of information that you'd like to share with the audience today? And if we start with Robert.
Sure. I think, and I would boil this down to its most simplistic element, go to your business, whether you're the CEO, the owner, the manager, take a look at it and just look at it through the lens of, would you want to work here? If you're recruiting for a waiter or a chef or an accountant, would you want that job? And if the answer is no, then why not? So what's your culture? What's your values? Do you value your people? Be transparent and actually have that conversation with yourself. And if at the end of the day, no, you don't want to do that job, then why would you expect anyone else to? So I think you really just have to have that dialogue with yourself.
Thank you. Craig?
I think the kind of final words for me are really along the lines of, don't ever stop. Just keep doing, keep reevaluating, keep going over. The success of our industry is never going to be final. And we need to keep moving that on and keep evolving. And it's equally as important to look back and learn as it is to keep moving forward and make sure, as I said, success is never final, especially where people are concerned. So keep evolving.
It's like climbing a mountain, never quite reaching the top, just bringing everyone with you. Dave?
Yeah, I think for me, it's talking to your teams. We've all spoken about this, that importance. The surveys, I think, are great, but actual physical conversations and listening to what they're saying is absolute key, understanding what they're struggling with. And then also following that up with praise. I've heard this a lot from my teams, that they don't feel they're getting enough, I suppose, recognition from their managers. So that's disappointing in itself, that they're not getting the praise. But the other side of that is holding people who are not doing their jobs, holding them accountable for that, because not everybody in our business, and this feels quite negative to almost end on this point, not everybody in the business is the right fit for the business. And focusing your time on people who aren't great detracts from the people who are great. And that's not where we should be going. And that's a really difficult conversation when you're struggling with staff, but holding those people who aren't doing a great job, you need to have those difficult conversations with them. So for me, it's the praise and the accountability are kind of the two parting shots for me.
Yeah, and that teamwork is such a big part of what we do working in hospitality. Yeah. Paul, can I hand the microphone to you?
Yeah, no problem. I think if I had one, it is don't compromise culture. That's it. Establish a culture, set your culture out, and then live it, bring it to life. Don't make it words on a page. Don't just make it a fantasy that people actually can't live up to. Create a culture that you want to be part of. Create a culture your team want to be part of. And then do everything in your power every single day to bring that to life.
Brilliant. Andrew?
I think I'd go back with a theme that I brought up earlier on, which is take mental well-being really seriously. It's quite a new theme for us, and I think it's a topic a lot of people are very uncomfortable with. So read about it, explore it, and then take it really seriously in your business. I think that a lot of people have been very scarred by the last 16 months, irrespective of how we as an industry behave. It's just what they've had to face at being alone at home for a long period of time. They've come back to a new world. Let's make the environment and the culture absolutely welcoming and inviting and something we really live and breathe, just as Paul said, but also try to get under the skin of people and just understand how do they really tick.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There's a whole range of new words that we're using, I can't say today, but in 2020 and 2021, like well-being, like culture, that really weren't much part of our industry before. Now, I did sort of hope we'd have the last few minutes dealing with questions from the audience. So I'm just going to try and glance at those and ask them at the same time. There's one here about how and where do you tell your brand story to engage potential team members? Right. So I guess that's a culture thing, as well as somebody wanting to maybe go with a blue chip company over an independent company and the benefits of either. Anybody wanting to take that question about telling the brand story?
We produce a brand book, which we send to everybody before they come and start with us. And it's a very comprehensive guide to what our brand stands for, what its values are. It uses some very straightforward talking in terms of we're honest and open. But we're really trying to tell people before they come to us, when you do come to us, be yourself. And you know, if you've got tattoos, if you've got a piercing, or there's something particularly you like about yourself that tells your story, then come here and feel that you can be very much yourself. It's not about dictating that you must wear your tie to this level. You must. I hate all that kind of stuff. This is about come and enjoy yourself here. And isn't that just such a straightforward thing to say?
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that was such a lovely point as well, Andrew. I think, ultimately, I get asked a lot about the fact that I've got tattoos. I find that quite an amazing experience. But, at the end of the day, what the hospitality industry is about people, is about how we care and look after our team, for them to care and look after our guests. Just because someone has a nose piercing does not make them an infidel that should be driven out of the industry. And I think one of the things that Eden certainly is immensely passionate about is the power to be yourself. We're working on our employer brand campaign at the moment, and it is about telling true real life stories about our people, their backgrounds, diversity, inclusion, the fact that we accept and want everyone to come and work for us. This is, our businesses should be a mix of the cultures that we surround ourselves by. And if that's tattoos, pink hair, maybe gray hair,
Thank you.
all those other things. Hey, look, this is natural. You put yours in. So look, at the end of the day, I think for us it's about acceptance of everyone and that care of everyone. And I don't mind what my team look like when they turn up. We give them a style guide to run to. Don't wear anything too crazy, but we turn up to work every day in jeans and t-shirts and smash it out the park. We've got the highest guest experience scores of anyone in our sector, and that isn't luck. That's because we care and empower people to do their job. So I think at the end of the day, it's not complicated. Actually, it's really not complicated. Just look after people like you'd look after anyone else.
Yeah, very wise words, Paul, very wise words. Got a question here for Robert. How optimistic are you for the industry to change behaviours about putting people at the forefront of everything? And will you be driving the IOH towards shifting this perception?
In terms of optimism, I don't need to be optimistic because it's going to happen 100%. And now it will happen because there are good people like the people on this call or people I've met that know this is the right thing to do. And it will happen because there will be employers that, like I referenced earlier, are not necessarily people focused, but will have to adapt because it's the only way they will get staff through their door. So I know that's going to happen. Some of the stories I've heard, certainly in the last few months, about businesses that were once competitors who are now sharing staff in order to survive, absolutely fills me with joy, because that's showing that we can actually cooperate, and barriers and competition just actually isn't as important as it once was. In terms of driving the IOH towards that, yes, 100%. I hope in my relatively modest time in the post, I have been. We've been running a spotlight series recently, which again, Andrew was part of. And what we do there is we bring individuals in. We take, let's say, 2 hotel GMs, and we ask them the same questions. And then we look at the differences. And then we ask them to tell us things about them that we might not know, just to show that they're actually human beings and not GMs or cruise line captains or whatever. So we're having some great success with that. And we've got some phenomenal plans coming up. Something that I really wish I could talk about, but I can't, launches in September, which is a huge people-focused initiative, which is, again, it's global. It's not just limited to the UK. And it's, in my mind, one of the most exciting things we've ever done. And I hope I haven't bigged it up too much, and in September it falls flat on its face. But we are definitely people front and centre. We're an individual membership organisation. We're not a business membership organisation.
And we're all much more adaptable to change than we were 18 months ago as well. So if you do have to change it, then I'm sure we'll be able to do that. And one quick one for Dave. We are running out of time here, but Dave, have you seen a difference in people culture of casual dining restaurants and hotels and leisure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the casual dining restaurants it feels like streets ahead of where the hotel, and particularly the hotel and leisure business that I'm in at the moment, they are streets ahead of where the hotel and leisure. The hotel and leisure business still feels quite stuffy, I think, in their approach. The tattoos, the piercings, that mentality that 15, 20 years ago in Wagamama just was applauded, I suppose. And it's pushing that, as Paul said, it doesn't make a difference whether you've got a nose piercing or a tattoo. It's your personality and what you bring to the table, literally bring to the table at that point, and the approach of that. And our job now is to I suppose, reduce the stuffiness in some of those hotels. There's some really great hotels out there, 5-star, that have people in t-shirts and trainers, and it doesn't make any difference to the service. Just because you've got a tie on doesn't mean you're going to get great service, and we need to look at the balance of that and explore why we do that and why we still think that. There's a lot of great people who've come through now in CEO and senior management positions that have come from those casual dining places that I think are now influencing those bigger hotel groups. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to a point where service is uniform across.
Brilliant. Well, that does bring us quite nicely very much towards the end of our time, but we're getting comments here applauding Paul's comments on culture being king and all of those sorts of things. So I think, to summarise, we all know that our staff are important. I don't think anyone can overestimate the amount of time that they spend and invest into their staff and the culture and getting it right, because the rewards will come, if not today, tomorrow, but certainly in next week, next month, and longer term, the results will begin to show on the bottom line as well, much more quickly than any other changes that you might see. So I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for listening, to those of you who aren't on the screen today, but especially to my fellow panelists here today, Robert, Craig, Dave, Paul, and Andrew. Thank you all very, very much. And let's go out there, let's empower our teams, let's go back to our schools and talk about hospitality and what a great career it is. Hi, Louise.
Thanks, Jane.
Sorry. Thank you, Jane. I just want to say we've run several sessions now, and the messages are clear. It all comes down to putting people at the forefront of absolutely everything we do, and putting a bit aside and put people at the top of the agenda. People are now the discussion of the boardrooms, which, you know, it has never happened before. So we need to look after them and love them. Behaviour change is needed. I loved your optimism, Robert, and all of you. A really, really passionate, panel here. We're hearing at Harry, all about people and financial well-being and the importance of it. So we're actually developing our tools to support businesses to do that. So all it leaves me to say is thank you so much. A really, really good panel. Thank you to everybody that joined us, and thank you, Jane, for fantastic facilitation today. We do still have the expo rooms open for a few minutes if you want to have a little browse in those, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.